Hi folks, welcome to today's presentation. Today we'll be talking about the humanistic approach, the theory, application, and assessment. The humanistic approach is one of my favorite schools of psychology, and it's a very interesting perspective through which we can understand personality. It's more geared towards the philosophical side, but it also has a lot of pragmatic value, and I hope that this presentation will be worthwhile. So, before we begin, just to quickly iterate the outline for today's presentation, we'll be talking about the history and roots of the humanistic psychology. We'll be talking about the key elements of the humanistic approach. We'll be talking about the proponents of this approach, such as Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. You must have heard their names before because their work is very well renowned across the world. And then we'll talk about the psychology of optimal experience and then the application value of the person-centered therapy created by Carl Rogers. We'll go into the assessment part of the humanistic approach, the Q-sort technique, and then we'll end the presentation with strengths and criticisms of this approach and summary slides. So let's take it away from here. So, the humanistic psychology is also known as existential psychology or phenomenological psychology. It has various different names, but the humanistic school of thought is sort of the dominating the predominant name in this school of thought. So, a little bit about the history of how it began. By the middle of the 20th century, two major views of humanity had emerged from the discipline of psychology. One was the Freudian concept, and according to this concept, we are all victims of unconscious sexual and aggressive instincts that constantly influence our behavior, whereas the other view came from the behaviorists, who in the extreme viewed humans as little more than large complex rats. Just as a rat is conditioned to respond to lab stimuli, humans are set to respond to stimuli in their living environments over which they have no control. We act the way we do because of the situation we're in or the situations we have been in before, not because of some personal choice or direction. Many psychologists had difficulty accepting either of these descriptions of human nature. In particular, important aspects of human personality, such as free will and human dignity, were missing from the Freudians and the behaviorists' description. In response to these concerns, a so-called third force was born, the humanistic approach, and it paints a very different picture of our species. Humanistic psychologists assume people are largely responsible for their actions. So if there is nothing else that you get out of this school of thought, the one and only thing, which is the crux of the school of thought, is that humanistic psychologists, they assume that people are largely responsible for their actions. That's the crux of the humanistic psychology, knowing that you are largely responsible for your actions. Although we sometimes respond automatically to the events and may at times be motivated by unconscious impulses, most of the time we have the power to determine our own destiny and to decide our actions. We have free will. Okay? So the whole humanistic psychology and its roots are found in existential philosophy, which addresses the meaning of human existence, the role of free will, uniqueness of each individual. Existential psychotherapy, its main idea is to focus on existential anxiety, which is the feelings of dread and panic that follow the realization that there is no meaning to your life. And psychotherapy in a way exists to emphasize the freedom of choice and to develop this type of lifestyle that reduces feelings of emptiness, anxiety, and boredom. And so the most famous existential psychologists were Binswanger and Boss, Viktor Frankl, Lange, and Rollo May. And a lot of the ideas under the school of thought were promoted by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, who we will look into soon. So now that we know the crux of the humanistic approach, which is basically that choice is the deal, choice is what matters. It's like humans, regardless of their unconscious motives or the environmental circumstances, the, the humans, they have the power to make a choice. And so we will go more into the individual components of the humanistic approach, but just to summarize real quick, there are four key tenets of the humanistic approach. The first is called personal responsibility, which says that under this approach, it's believed that people are largely responsible for what happens to them. So it completely shifts the person from a victim mode where the person is like, oh, this is happening because of the world, because of everyone else. I'm not at all responsible for where I am in my life. It's just how sucky the world is. It completely removes the person from that disempowering way of thinking to an empowering way of thinking, where you say, I am the creator of my life. I am responsible for what happens to me, and I am going to create the life that I want because I take responsibility for it. And so the first key tenet of the humanistic approach is personal responsibility. The second is the here and now. So living in the here and now. People can't become fully functioning individuals until they learn to live their lives as it happens. That's one of the second assumptions of this humanistic approach. So unless you are stuck in the past or living in the future, you're not completely experiencing your humanness. And so it's all about living in the here and now. The third tenet is the experience of the individual. Remember, as I shared earlier, it's not the environment, it's not your unconscious stuff, it's how you are experiencing yourself right this moment. So therapists, they provide the therapeutic atmosphere to allow clients to help and experience themselves. And then it's about personal growth. People are automatically motivated to move towards progress and achieving a satisfying state of being. So, as a human being, we all have this natural propensity to personally grow and move towards personal growth. And so, these four are the key elements of the humanistic approach: personal responsibility, the here and now experience of the individual, and propensity towards personal growth. We will go into each one right now. So, when it comes to understanding personal responsibility, um, listen to these words very carefully, okay? Because they have a very potent um, value hidden under them. So, listen to these words very carefully. Although we may try to deny it, we are ultimately responsible for what happens to us. We commonly use the phrase, I have to. We say, I have to go to class. I have to meet some friends. I have to take care of my children, and so forth. But the truth is that we don't have to do any of these things. Within limits, there is practically nothing we have to do. Rather, humanistic psychologists argue virtually all our behaviors represent personal choices. Just imagine that for a second. You don't have to do anything. Everything in your life is a personal choice. Just think about that for a second. Think about how much power lies within you to make that choice. People choose to remain in relationships. They do not have to. We choose to act passively. We could decide to act forcefully. We choose to go to work, call our friends, leave a party, or send a Christmas present. We do not have to do any of these things. Oops, sorry. The price we pay for making some of these choices can be steep, but they are choices nonetheless. So at the end of the day, it really boils down to choices, to the personal responsibility you take towards making these choices. Remember, if you are sad in any particular situation, if you're depressed, I know how helpless it can feel. I know how, desperate and anxiety provoking it can be. But you have the choice to get out of it. You have the choice and the power to take the responsibility to push yourself in the direction of life that you want to create for yourself. You have that choice and you have that power. And the humanistic perspective puts a lot of emphasis on this state of personal responsibility. And so, taking responsibility means two things. Again, listen very carefully to this part. Taking responsibility can be deconstructed into two actions. One is no more blaming others for your problems. So, taking responsibility means do not blame anyone else for your own problems. Stop blaming others for your problems. Because the minute you do that, you're putting yourself in a state of victim consciousness. And that's the most unhealthy and disempowering place you can ever put yourself in. Yes, shit happens. Yes, life sucks sometimes. But blaming others is not going to solve it, because you're just relying on other people to solve your issues. That's not going to work. You will end up just getting hurt over and over again. So one of the key tenets of taking responsibility is no more blaming others for your problems, okay? And the second one is no more feeling sorry for yourself, okay? Remember these two words, these two actions under taking responsibility. Stop the self-pity and stop the self-victim consciousness, okay? The minute you stop blaming the world and you stop feeling sorry for yourself, you start taking action. You start crafting the type of future and vision you want to see in your life, and you start working towards it. If things are going to change, it is up to you to do the changing. So that's kind of the thought process that goes behind you, okay? If things are going to change, it is up to me to do the changing. And when people are taking responsibility, again, I will cut back to this when we talk about what a fully functioning individual is, but just keep that notion in mind of taking responsibility and what it is to be a fully functioning individual. And I'll connect the dots soon in this presentation. So the second tenet which we spoke about was here and now. A popular poster that kind of defines the humanistic approach in a nutshell is today is the first day of the rest of your life. So what does it mean when you say living in the here and now? It's basically saying that new moment is a new opportunity, okay? So one of the reasons I love the humanistic approach so much is because it really empowers you as a person, and it helps you detach from things that are unnecessary and are damaging you for no reason at all. So the humanistic view maintains that we need to be victims. We need not be victims of our past, okay? So it views that we need not be victims of our past. Certainly, our past experiences shape and influence who we are and how we behave, but these experiences should not dictate what we can become. People do not need to remain shy and unassertive just because they always have been that way. You do not have to remain in an unhappy relationship simply because you don't know what else to do. Your past has guided you to where you are today, but it is not an anchor. Remember those words. So living in the here and now means that you honor the fact that your past experiences have shaped you, have influenced you to what you have become today, but you never, ever, ever allow the past to become your anchor. Okay? It guides you, it influences you, it dictates you, but it does not become an anchor. It does not dictate what you can become or what you are becoming. Okay? That's why the phrase new moment, new opportunity is very freeing, because you will realize that at any moment, with a snap of a finger, you can say, okay, this is a new moment, a fresh start, a new opportunity. Snap. Okay? Just snap yourself out of it. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but know that every new minute of your life is you snapping out of your past. Okay? And there's actually something beautiful that I would like to also share here, which I haven't really shared before in my previous presentations, and I might make a separate presentation on this one day. But if anyone has heard of the Schrodinger experiment, the cat experiment, so I think he's a famous physician, if you've heard of him, Schrodinger. So, um, Schrodinger's full name was, I think, Erwin. Yes, Erwin Rudolph Joseph Alexander Schrodinger was his name. He was an Austrian-Irish physicist, and he proposed something that was known as the cat experiment, in which it was actually a thought experiment, and this guy was really brilliant. He was really smart. He created and discovered and invented a lot of different things that have had a major impact in our world, and he was also very close to Albert Einstein, who appreciated and admired his work greatly. And this specific cat experiment was something that Albert Einstein also critiqued and appreciated Schrodinger for. So what happens in the basic cat experiment is that he says, visualize a cat in a box, and you put the cat near a radioactive substance with sort of a sensor or a meter. And just to simplify the technical terms, what happens is that the cat, given any moment in time based on the sensor and the meter, the radioactive substance can break, and the cat will die as soon as the radioactive substance breaks. However, if the sensor doesn't go off, the radioactive substance doesn't break, and the cat still stays alive. So what Schrodinger proposed was that when the box is closed, okay, the cat lives in two possibilities, okay, to the observer's eye. And this is speaking in terms of quantum physics and quantum, the way quantum subatomic particles and parallel realities work. This is sort of the thinking in that direction. And so let's say the cat is put in a box, and then the cat is existing in two possibilities, right? It's existing in two parallel realities until the box is sealed, right? Until the observer hasn't observed the cat yet on the inside, right? So the cat can either be alive or dead. That's the two possibilities. That's the two parallel realities existing at once, okay? And so what happens is, until the box is sealed, the cat is either dead or it's either alive. But once the box is opened, the deal is sealed. Once the observer sees the cat inside the box, the deal is sealed to one of the two possibilities, which is the cat is either alive, what the observer sees, or the cat is dead. Okay? So the reason I'm sharing this experiment with you is because it's an example of sort of how possibilities exist, and living in the here and now, it's connected to this idea of the Schrodinger cat, because if you think about it, our box as human beings, the existence, the way we live, living in the here and now, our box is never opened. Okay? So what does that mean when our box is never opened? It means that our deal is never sealed, like the cat. We are always existing in a realm of possibilities and probabilities. And that's the beauty of human existence. That's the beauty of living in the here and now. You are living in a world of infinite possibilities. You're neither stuck in the past nor stuck in the future. You're just observing the way life is taking you in the direction that life is taking you. And just like the cat was either dead or alive, your observation determines whether you want to seal the deal or not. Now, these are very abstract concepts, and I can explain it to you at a later point, but just to come back to this idea of living in the here and now, according to the humanistic approach, it's a very important facet because it means that every new opportunity, every new moment, creates a new opportunity for you, a new start, a new fresh beginning. Okay? So let's move to the next one. The next is the individual's experience. Now, why is this important? So again, we're going back to the individual and the value of the experience of your own personal existence in life. So no one knows you better than yourself. This observation is a cornerstone of the humanistic psychology, okay? So individual experience is everything under the school of thought because no one knows you better than you know yourself. You know, firsthand. Everyone knows you secondhand. No one knows you firsthand like you know yourself. So, humanistic therapists seek to understand what their clients are experiencing and try to provide a therapeutic atmosphere that allows clients to help themselves. Now, why do you think when you go to therapy, why don't you think psychotherapy involves just basic advice? Like you could just go to a therapist and the therapist could advise you and say, do this, do that, and you're done, right? Why do you have to go for 6 months, for years together in therapy? Why don't therapists guide you or give you advice? Why do they just ask questions? Because the whole purpose of therapy is to understand that the essence of human nature is the fact that they know themselves firsthand. You can only be a mirror to their understanding of themselves. You can reflect what they know about themselves, but you can never guide them, never advise them, because the purpose is to build the ego capacity of the individual. So, ego capacity means building their ability to navigate themselves in the world through their own understanding of the self and others, right? And so, the whole purpose of therapy is to help facilitate this understanding about oneself. And you can't just advise and guide people. It doesn't happen. It's a journey of discovery. And so the humanistic approach is hardcore, emphatic on this point of view that an individual's experience matters most, and therapy is there to show the individual what their experience is like and how to understand themselves better. So it is only when you consider and advise and come to a decision on your own that you are able to resolve the problem. So what is personal growth? The last tenet of the humanistic approach is your orientation, your propensity towards growing as a person. Okay, so it says that we are all motivated to progress towards some ultimately satisfying state of being. And here the idea of fully functioning individual comes, which Carl Rogers had proposed, akin to Abraham Maslow's idea of self-actualization, where he said that a person becomes self-actualized when he or she becomes more of what one idiosyncratically is, to become everything that one is capable of becoming. Okay, so that's the idea of personal growth. The growth process is assumed to be the natural manner of human development. right? Just like nature grows, just like people age, just like everything in life is developing, in the same way we grow and develop. It's just the natural state of nature in general, not just human nature. We progress towards a satisfying state unless life's difficulties prevent us from doing so. When obstacles block our personal growth, humanistic psychotherapy can be helpful. So, humanistic psychotherapy believes that people have this natural propensity towards growing, but then certain obstacles get in the way, which cause existential anxiety, and then therapy helps because it helps put the clients back on track. Only the client can do it. The therapist creates a therapeutic atmosphere that allows the clients to overcome their problems and continue growing. Rogers prescribes this ever unfolding of oneself as a process of becoming. That's such a beautiful term, right? You're unfolding your understanding of yourself, and that is known to be the process of becoming. Now, it's high time we actually talk about Carl Rogers because we've hinted at a lot of his concepts. And so, this is Carl Rogers. He was born in 1902. Carl was a shy but very intelligent boy growing up in Illinois. He had a particular fondness for science, and by the time he was 13, he had developed a reputation as the local expert on biology and agriculture. He had planned a career in farming but soon lost his enthusiasm. Rogers eventually left the church to pursue graduate study in psychology at Columbia. Theology at he started off doing theology at Columbia, and then he went into the field of psychology. Rogers pioneered humanistic psychotherapy. He was the first to popularize person-centered approach to treating clients, so that is what his therapy was called, person-centered approach. And he was an early advocate of using groups as a form of therapy. He eventually expanded his ideas from his work with clients into a general theory of personality. Late in his career, Rogers applied the humanistic approach to social issues such as education and world peace. So, according to Roger, he believed in every individual's potential for to live a fulfilling and happy life. Okay? So Rogers believed in this potential that every person had it to live a fulfilling and happy life. And and people are striving towards becoming fully functioning persons. And what is a fully functioning person? People who strive and reach an optimal sense of satisfaction in their lives. So when you say the idea of fully functioning person, or like a self-actualized person, one misconception that might come to mind is, oh, this is like a superman, like who is like has everything and under control, and they're just so like they're the best at what they do and they have it all. And yes, and also no. So a fully functioning person isn't some superhero or like someone who's attained nirvana, or like gained enlightenment or something like that. But a fully functioning person is someone who has actually reached a optimal sense of satisfaction in their lives. Okay, so if you are in a place in your life where you feel a sense of optimal an optimal sense of satisfaction in your life, that means you are already a fully functioning person. Okay, a question you can ask yourself is, and it could be a contentious one or not, but it's an interesting question to ask, and very existentially oriented. A question to ask yourself would be, if I die tomorrow, will I tell myself that I lived a fulfilled life today? Okay, so that's a very cool question to ask yourself, because that will tell you if you are already a fully functioning person or you're striving towards becoming a fully functioning person, one who has an optimal sense of satisfaction in your life. Okay, so a fully functioning person also has some key characteristics. Okay, and then there are 4 key characteristics that a fully functioning person has. One is they are open to new experiences. Now, what does it mean being open to new experiences? Someone who is open to new experiences means they're not rigid, they are flexible, they have a level of faith, they are open minded, they are fluid, right? They are open to what life is bringing forth to them. The second characteristic of a fully functioning person is they try to live each moment as it comes. So they're not stuck in the past or the future. The idea is to experience life and not just pass through it. That's the whole idea. So they live each moment as it comes, living each moment, enjoying each moment to the level of to gaining that level, that optimal level of satisfaction with yourself. They learn to trust their feelings. Okay? So you are open to new experiences. You try to live each moment as it comes, and you learn to trust your feelings. Again, this is all about empowerment, being the creator of your life, basing it on your own personal choice. See how apart these propositions are from feeling like a victim, from feeling defeated, from feeling, you know, just like blown away by your circumstances. It's all about achieving this trust in yourself, in being open and fluid, living each moment as it comes. It means gratitude, right? So the first one, which is being open to new experiences, that means flexibility. The second one, trying to live each moment as it comes, that means gratitude, right? Third, learning to trust your feelings, it means faith, right? Trust, faith. And the fourth one, they experience emotions, both positive and negative, more deeply and more intensely than most people. Now, what does that mean? Let's stay on this for a bit. So one might think that, oh, a fully functioning person is like this, like I told you earlier, is this enlightened person who doesn't feel emotions anymore, who's detached and who's just like taking it easy, like he has got it all, he doesn't get impacted anymore. In fact, people who have gained enlightenment, you could say that these people experience emotions even more than a normal individual, than a regular person who's, you know, living in the victim consciousness mode. So people who consider themselves fully functioning, they are open to experiencing both positive and negative emotions more deeply and more intensely than most people, because by doing so they lead richer lives. And what does this mean? It means they live a life that makes them experience the full range of human emotions and human experience. Does that make sense? So living a life which makes you experience the full range of human emotions and human experience. Okay? So think about where you are in your life right now and where you want to be in your life, right? From point A to point B. And practice striving, if you're not already, towards this idea of the fully functioning person, if this is something that resonates with you. Because it's not about all the external accomplishments only. If that's something that motivates you, it's great, but it's not all about that. It's the inside. It's whether you feel an optimal sense of satisfaction in your life. You can have everything in your life and you could still kill yourself. So at the end of the day, it's achieving that optimal sense of satisfaction in your life. What makes you get there is number one, being open, fluid, flexible. Number two, being grateful, living each moment as it comes. Number three, trusting. Trusting is so, so, so important. Trusting is key to living a happy life. When you trust, you can actually let go. So if any of you are stuck in some toxic pattern, if any of you feel that you need desperate help towards something, trust. Trust in your feelings. Trust that things will work in your favor. Trust that. Trust it. Trust that you can get out of the situation. Just trust that. And lastly, do not be afraid to experience emotions in full range, because this only makes you a deeper and richer human being. Okay? So, this is the idea of being a fully functioning person. I would like you all to really resonate with this slide and think about where you are in your life and where you want to be, and how you can follow some of these existential ideas and connect it to your own trajectories of life. So if we so another question to ask yourself is, if we all have an innate desire to be fully functioning individuals, why is there so much unhappiness in the world? Why doesn't everyone get the maximum enjoyment out of life? Because becoming a fully functioning person doesn't eliminate all our problems. But it does mean we acknowledge and deal with these problems directly rather than rely on psychological defenses to avoid them. So remember the idea I told you? Why isn't everything solved if we're all like fully functioning people? Because fully functioning people does not mean it's the elimination of all our problems. It just means that we acknowledge and deal with it and are not afraid to face it. You may believe that you are a good tennis player, a kind person, a good student, or a pleasant conversationist, but occasionally you receive information that contradicts this self concept. For example, suppose you think of yourself as the kind of person everybody likes, but one day you overhear someone say what a jerk he thinks you are. How do you react? If you were fully functioning, you would accept the information. You might acknowledge to yourself that although you are a fine person, not everyone is going to find you pleasant and wonderful. Unfortunately, most of us are not capable of such a well adjusted reaction. So sometimes, when you go through a heartbreak or when you get rejected, you fail, it's so hard for you to acknowledge that because you feel that it defines who you are. But part of being a fully functioning person or experiencing life in a healthy way is to tell yourself that although you know you you have faced this situation, not everyone is going to find you or give you what you want in life. And and it's okay. Okay, because you are who you are and you just accept that. Okay, so for those of us who fall short of being fully functioning, here information that threatens our self concept, and this is what leads to anxiety. So and if that information is excessively threatening, the anxiety will be difficult to manage. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that if you look at the other schools of thought, such as the psychodynamic school of thought or the behaviorist school of thought, anxiety is something that comes from, let's say the id and the ego, or the id and the superego have a conflict, and that gives out anxiety. Or let's say your um, um, in the behaviorist perspective, let's say that the behaviorist environmental circumstances, you are not able to cope with that as well, and they trigger you, and that causes anxiety. But In the humanistic approach, and according to Carl Rogers, anxiety is the result of encountering information that is inconsistent with the way we think of ourselves. Okay? And anxiety is when we fall short of becoming this fully functioning person, and we hear information that threatens our self concept. Okay, so we're feeling threatened about our self concept, like someone doesn't really love us the way that we love them, or something like that. It threatens the way we feel about ourselves, and that is what causes anxiety. So how do we get around this? We acknowledge to ourselves that although you are a fine person, not everyone is going to find you pleasant and wonderful. And that's still okay, because you know you are the best of who you are. And even if you aren't the best, you have that optimal level of satisfaction with yourself. And this is a very, like, it's not an easy place to reach, but it's certainly doable. It's certainly achievable. So when you're faced, so Rogers proposed that we initially process this threatening information at a level somewhere below consciousness, a process he calls subception. Rogers called our most common defense distortion. So when something presents itself that is inconsistent and threatens your self-concept, you will um, you will use two types of defenses. One is called distortion, where you modify the facts. You're like, oh, that's not possible, this person still likes me, or it's not possible, the school didn't read my application that well before they rejected me. Or we deny it and we say, no, it didn't happen at all, you know. And so returning to this example, we convince ourselves that the person who called you a jerk was in a bad mood or is just a rude person. However, in more extreme cases, you might resort to an outright denial. You might convince yourself he wasn't really talking about me, but someone else with a name that sounds like mine, you know? So, distortion and denial are two very common defense strategies when you feel this existential angst and anxiety, when something threatens your self concept. So, why is it so difficult to face facts and incorporate relevant information as we develop a sense of who we are? Rogers' answer is that most of us grow up in an atmosphere of conditional positive regard. Okay, now this is so some people are really good at achieving the state of fully functioning being because of their upbringing. They were brought up in a very unconditional, loving environment in which they just owned themselves for whoever they were. They didn't stop loving themselves. However, some people struggle a lot to accept themselves for who they are. They get easily rejected by society, or they easily get affected by others outside of your circle, or they depend on external validation because they grew up in a conditional positive regard environment. Okay, so what is conditional positive regard? When, let's say, your caregivers have provided an atmosphere where admiration is gained only when accepted behavior is portrayed. So when a kid is behaving good, the parent admires the kid. When the kid is behaving bad, the parent does not admire the child. The parent reprimands the child or says, "You're a bad kid. Like, this is not good. This is not a nice thing to do." And so what that type of parenting does is that it leads the kid to deny their own weaknesses. They say, okay, I'm good in, let's say, study, so my parents love me. I come first in class, so my parents love me. If I come last in class, they won't love me. So I cannot even I cannot accept that I'm a weak, like I'm an underachiever. I cannot accept that at all. And so you beat about yourself, and if you come across a situation where you fail or you get rejected, you feel immediately thrown off guard because you feel, oh, I cannot accept that I'm an underachiever because you know I'm not loved, like I'm not lovable if someone does not accept me in that regard. And so the only way you can overcome this feeling of a lack of love, despite, regardless of the external circumstances, is resolved through unconditional positive regard. Okay? So it's the unconditional positive regard that you show towards yourself, that you've been brought up in, that actually enables you to be independent, to love yourself independent of any external accomplishments or validation. So regardless of how people think of you, how people treat you, how people like or dislike you, none of that matters. And yes, it is good if some of that matters, because in a social world it's helpful for you to know how to present yourself. However, if you are completely dependent on it to define how much you love yourself or how worthy you are of being loved, then it's a losing situation. You will always feel not worthy of love. It's and remember, self-worth is knowing that you're worthy of love and respect regardless of whatever is going on in your life. It's the being that defines your self-worth. It's not the doing. Okay? We're talking about a lot of abstract concepts here, and I wish I was live having a dialogue with you all, but this is one of the avenues through which we can have this conversation, and I'll try to make the best of it. So, if you look at this image, is this child a bad boy, or has he merely done a bad thing? Rogers argues that parents should provide children with unconditional positive regard. And how do you do that? You say that although the boy may have done something the mother did not like, he is still loved and prized by her. So, parenting is a very important job. If you ever become a parent, remember that it's very important to raise your children in ways which make them feel secure about themselves fully. So, you tell your child that even though they failed in class, or they did not come first, or they reacted badly towards someone, or their behavior was bad, it does not mean that you're not loved and prized by me, by the parent. Okay? When the parent says that I love you, and I know your behavior was bad, but I still love you, that can be extremely positively transforming for the child. That really helps the child um, gain that sense of self-worth. So let me see if there's anything else I have to cover, and then I'll jump into Abraham Maslow. So, just real quick, the antidote for the self defeating sequence is unconditional positive regard. When we experience unconditional positive regard, we know we will be accepted and loved no matter what we say or do. Rogers advised parents to communicate to their children that although they don't approve of a specific behavior, they will always love and accept the child. Under these conditions, children no longer feel a need to deny thoughts and feelings that might lead their parents to withdraw affection. They are free to incorporate faults and weaknesses into their self concepts, and thereby are better able to experience life. So this is exactly what happens when the parent tells them that no matter what they do, even though they don't approve of the like defiant stuff that the child does, which is important to shape the child in pro-social ways, the parent is inadvertently telling the child that there's this default baseline of love that I'm offering you, and you shouldn't be afraid of showing your weakness or accepting your faults and weaknesses within um, this circle of love, because you're still loved despite of your weaknesses. And so what happens is the child doesn't deny these weaknesses anymore. There's no resistance. You accept yourself for who you are completely. Okay, so let's jump to the next slide. So Abraham Maslow was also a very successful proponent of the existential school of thought. He was born in 1908, and although generally regarded as a warm and gregarious adult, Maslow had a cold and lonely childhood. In his own words, he says, I was the little Jewish boy in the non Jewish neighborhood. I was isolated and unhappy. I grew up in libraries and among books without friends. His parents were uneducated Russian immigrants and encouraged Maslow to go to law school. He went to the City College of New York with a law career in mind, but he found law uninteresting and dropped out during the first year. Maslow later went to Cornell and then to the University of Wisconsin to study psychology. Maslow wondered what psychology could do for the happy, healthy side of personality. In his own words, he said, Freud supplied to us the sick half of psychology, he wrote, and we must now fill it out with the healthy half. Maslow replaced Freud's pessimistic and dismal view of human nature with an optimistic and uplifting portrayal. In addition, although he acknowledged the existence of unconscious motifs, Maslow focused his work on conscious aspects of personality. The contrasting experiences of today's middle-class citizens and those of Depression-era workers illustrate a key aspect of Maslow's theory of personality, that is, which needs affect our behavior depend on the circumstances in our lives. Maslow described two types of motifs. Okay, so in his famous pyramid theory, he said that at the bottom of it lie two motifs. The first is deficiency motifs, and the second is growth needs. Okay, so what happens in deficiency is that you lack something, you genuinely feel a lack of something, and you feel a state of emptiness, and this results in the feeling of lack of that needed object, and you're satisfied when you obtain it. So your goal in the deficiency motif is to get it. Like, I want it, I want it, I want it. Like, you're hungry, you want food. You're thirsty, you want water. You are feeling empty of love, you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a relationship, So that's the deficiency motif that's making you be in that state of hunger. And you can only fulfill this hunger once you're satisfied. But a growth need is not satisfied by finding the object of need. So a growth need is when you're satisfied by expressing the motif. So under the growth need, you're sort of like already filled up. That empty part of you is already satisfied, and now you just want to give. You want to be in a state of giving. And when you're in a state of giving, then you are motivated by the satisfaction that comes from giving. You're not coming from a place of lack, but you're coming from a place of abundance. And so deficiency motif, you're coming from a place of lack. I don't have it, I want it. But growth need or growth motif is you're coming from a place of I have it, I'm ready to give it, and so my reward is going to be just how motivated and satisfied I feel because I can share my abundance with someone else. Now, when you look at the hierarchy of needs, if you look at this pyramid, you'll see that as you go upward, you see more of those growth needs being met. So once the deficiency needs are met, like your physiological needs, your safety needs, your belongingness, love needs, then you have like your esteem needs, your needs for self-actualization, where you can go into a state of like, I need to give, I need to, like provide. And it's in providing that I will truly feel that sense of fulfillment in my life, and that's a state that you achieve here. You can also achieve it here, but again, it's individual human experiences. So let's just go here. So, categories of needs identified and arranged by Maslow were physiological needs, example, hunger, thirst, air, sleep. They must be satisfied before moving to higher level needs. And then you have safety needs, security, stability, protection, structure, order, and freedom from chaos. And this is prominent when the future is unpredictable. And believe it or not, all of these are very important. Just because deficiency motif seems a little towards the negative side, it doesn't mean it's not important as well. Like, that's an important need too. And you have to be able to honor and acknowledge all parts of you. So, in the hierarchy of needs, there is the third, fourth, and fifth, which is belongingness and love needs. So he differentiates something known as D love and B love. D love is the need to satisfy the emptiness people experience without it, and B love is experienced and grows as a result of being in the relationship. Okay, so B love is where you're always like you want it, right? And you're satisfied when someone fills that space. But be love is when you're actually in the state of love. Now, let's pause for a second here. How many of you have complained? And I know you're at the stage of your life where some of you might be in romantic relationships, some of you may not be in romantic relationships, and things like that. But how many of you have experienced this stage of life where you complained about, I'm not finding love in my life? It's so hard to find love these days, like everyone's just like selfish and stuff like that. So if you feel like you resonate with some of these thoughts, well, there's something very interesting and powerful that I will share with you right now. Love can never be found, okay? It can never be found because it is only in creating love that one can find it. What does that mean? It means that it's resonating with this idea of be love, right? It is when you know how to create love that love is found. So when you go actively searching for it, and you're searching for people to fulfill that part of you, you it won't work. You have to create it in order to find it. You have to become loving. You have to become that infinite source of love and givingness that ends up blossoming whatever you want to experience in your life. So that's just one facet of this idea of the D love and B love. Okay, so the next is esteem needs to perceive oneself as competent and achieving, and then the need for self-actualization, and that's satisfied when people identify their true self and reach full potential. So let's see if this slide. Okay, so real quick before we move to the next slide, self-actualized people have some specific characteristics. Just like the fully functioning people, self-actualized people tend to accept themselves for what they are. Okay, again, it's not about being a big shot, right? A self-actualized person isn't about being a big shot or like accomplishing all the grand superficial things that you can think of in life, like status, wealth, health, whatever that is. It's about finding that sense of satisfaction with yourself, right? And so a self-actualized person accepts themselves for what they are. They admit to personal weaknesses and they work to improve themselves where they can. But they don't spend a lot of time worrying about things they might have done. They aren't perfect, but they respect and feel good about themselves for what they are. Okay? So, a self actualized person, I'm going to repeat this. They tend to accept themselves for what they are. They admit to personal weaknesses and they can work to improve themselves where they can. So, even though they admit to personal weaknesses, they don't like, you know, dismiss striving towards competence. They still strive towards growth. um, they they don't spend a lot of time worrying about things they might have done, so they don't live in the past, and they aren't perfect, but they respect and feel good about themselves for what they are. So being in that level of optimal sense of satisfaction, right? You're not perfect, but you're satisfied with who you are, but at the same time you're not satisfied to just stop your growth. You're satisfied enough, and you want to keep experiencing more and more of who you can become. That is what a self actualized person is. So now we're going to change gears a little bit and go into looking at the misconceptions about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One of the assumptions is that the lower needs must be satisfied before turning to higher needs, but that's not true. You could get self-actualized before any of the other needs. So it's it doesn't have to be in a sequence. The second is description that need hierarchy is universal. So again, means so it doesn't mean like these needs are universal. It also varies across cultures, and there is this oversimplification that any behavior is motivated by a single need, but it's not true. Like if a certain behavior is because you haven't had your love and belongingness needs met, it's more complex. Human beings are complex, and behavior is a result of multiple motivations. um, the study of psychologically healthy people, Maslow believed that knowing self-actualized people can provide lessons others can follow and fulfill their full potential. So, Maslow actually turned to records and documents to learn about historic figures who have lived self-actualized lives, like Thomas Jefferson, Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, Albert Schweitzer. So all of these people um, lived a very self-satisfied life. It's not just about what they achieved, but the fact of how they felt within, regardless of what they achieved or not. And um, he liked to study these people, and he said that there are different psychologically healthy individuals, the non-peakers and the peakers. The non-peakers have a clear direction in life, right? And the peakers are less conventional and more concerned with abstract notions. So, but both are psychologically healthy. Okay? So these were some of the things he proposed. He also proposed the idea of optimal experience, if you've heard of that. Um, so, what is optimal experience? Moments in which a person's attention is entirely focused on an activity, right? Or you talk about the flow state. So, the idea of optimal experience is important because optimal experience kind of also reflects where a person who has that optimal sense of satisfaction with self finds themselves. So the components would be activity is challenging and skillful, right? You find yourself in a flow state when something is challenging and skillful, when your attention is completely absorbed by that activity, when you have clear goals, you have a clear feedback, your concentration can only be on the current task. You have a sense of achievement, of personal control. There is a loss of self-consciousness, loss of sense of time. All of these features define what an optimal experience feels like. You feel really attuned. And I think sometimes, when people say, you I'm hustling, like I'm in the hustle of things and I'm loving it, like you're running around and you're in the hustle of things and you're like, my life is such a hustle and I absolutely love it. It's because they feel this optimal experience, and that's why they love it, because they feel that flow state. If hustling felt effortful, if it felt like a struggle, like suffering, you wouldn't enjoy it as much. But if hustling felt like that optimal experience that we're talking about, then you would really, really, really enjoy it, like going back to back and, enjoying life to the fullest and living, you know, in that flow state. So, again, the things I said put in a more formal way. Feel free to pause and see this and read this slide. So next we're going to jump to the application of the person-centered therapy, okay? So far we've talked about what humanistic approach is, the key tenets, what Rogers and Maslow proposed, and now we're going to look at the application value. So Rogers, application of Rogerian therapy, Rogers proposed the person-centered therapy, and it was all about making clients more fully functioning and happier. So the goal of the therapy is to take a person towards the direction of becoming fully functioning and happier. It involves creating a proper relationship with clients, okay? They are open and genuine, okay? So how do you create a proper relationship with clients? Rogers said there are key characteristics that the therapist must have to help a person become fully functioning. One is they must be open and genuine, because first of all you're modeling the same behaviors to the person so they can learn from you, first of all. Second of all, you are showing them that you are actually authentic with yourself, and so the patient can trust you. The second is this unconditional positive regard, that is really the key here. If kids are having, let's say a patient is like in a kid state when they enter therapy, they're in a regression state, they're not able to navigate their life, they need guidance, right? So they're in that they're in that decompensating state. And so what Rogers proposes, when you provide this unconditional positive environment for this regressed entity, you allow them to flourish within that environment. You allow this person to know that regardless of who they are or how much they resist themselves, they are loved and they are accepted, and it's authentic and it's coming from a genuine and authentic place. And then you do reflection, okay? Like I shared before, it's all about helping the clients understand their own thoughts and feelings. You never guide or advise the patient, you reflect to them who they are showing themselves to be. And in reflecting that, they understand more of who they are, and through the process and journey of being in therapy, they come to accept themselves for who they are, and they let go of holding on to those wounded parts of themselves, because they know that even those wounds are wounds that are loved, and they're not wounds that are not acceptable. They're acceptable, they are accepted within this genuine, authentic, unconditional, positive regarding space. So keywords: open and genuine, unconditional positive regard, and reflection. In the freedom provided by the therapist's unconditional support, what happens is that the clients peel away their defenses, accept who they are, and begin to appreciate all of life's experiences. Okay? So if you are feeling really bummed out, if you're feeling bad about yourself in any given situation, you are put in an environment, or imagine yourself in an environment filled with acceptance, filled with love, despite of whatever you are, like it's just fully accepting you. Just put yourself in that environment and see that you start peeling away your defenses, and you accept yourself for who you are, and you appreciate life for all of life's experiences. So on the other side of things, when we look at the California Q-SORT test, that's actually an assessment method, another application method under the existential approach. I don't think they use this technique anymore as much, because now we have all these like online tests tests and stuff. But back then, Rogers was really known for creating this California Q-SORT test. And what it involves is that it requires the client to sort a deck of 100 self-descriptive cards into 9 categories according to his or her real and ideal self. Okay, so let's say a self-description is I am a very friendly person. Okay, and so if that is your true self, you would say extremely characteristic of you, kind of a thing, or you would say extremely uncharacteristic, or you would say neutral, right? And so the idea is to determine which self-descriptions are your real self or your ideal self. And so it allowed the client to describe themselves. It allowed the clients to see whose real and ideal selves, like their real and ideal selves, and the correlations between them. Right? So, for example, your ideal self is to be, let's say, maybe have a six pack, or like, I'm just trying to bring realistic examples, especially in this day and age. People put so much emphasis on body image and culture and, I don't know, race and all of those things, that perhaps in your mind your ideal self is, I want to look like Johnny Bravo. Or let's say your ideal self is, oh, I want to look like a Victoria's Secret model, but your real self is that you look like, just yourself. Like you might not have that six pack, you might not be as tall as a Victoria's Secret model, and so on and so forth. So here in therapy, what Rogers tries to do is see how far away your ideal self is from your real self. Now, if you feel that your ideal self is way far from your real self, then the therapy is used as a platform to find that alignment and to be okay with it. So yes, you do not look like a Victoria's Secret model. Yes, you do not look like Johnny Bravo. And maybe you shouldn't even. That's like way distorted. But anyways. So yes, you do not look like that. You're not that ideal person that you see yourself to be. And that is okay. Okay? You are aligning your ideal self with your actual self. And even so, like, if that's still not okay, then how can you turn your actual self towards that ideal self? So within therapy, you could also take the other route, right? You could say, okay, I'm not my ideal self, but I want to be. So okay, fine, then train and become close to looking like a Victoria's Secret model, or train to become close to, becoming or looking or having a six pack, And so that way, that's another avenue of aligning your real self with your ideal self. But at both opposite sides, you are always living in that unconditional, loving environment that you are able to feel secure while you're growing and you're aligning yourself. So that's the idea of therapy. The real and ideal self correlations increase as clients move through client-centered psychotherapy. And this is an example of a 40-year-old female client who changed her real and ideal self correlations. So this is before therapy. You can see the correlation between the ideal and the self is very, very low. And then as therapy progresses, you can see 5.5 months, right? When therapy is like here, you could see the person's self and ideal self are at 0.69, right? And so the correlation has become stronger. So their ideal self and actual self are more aligned. And so when you do 7-month follow-up, 5-month follow-up, it keeps increasing. That's what he found from this test from across therapy. Now, even within the person, so not just between the self ideal and actual self, but across time, you see that yourself is more aligned, or it's correlating highly with your improved version versus your past version. And even here, it's correlating strongly across the board. So you can see the ideal self correlate strongly here. So it's kind of like you've achieved this ideal self here. So those are very interesting observations that were made. So we're almost towards the end of this presentation. And we'll end with looking at the strengths and criticisms of the humanistic approach. So the strengths are that the emphasis is on the healthy side of personality. There are several aspects have been adopted by therapists from other theoretical perspectives. Growth of encounter groups. The humanistic psychology adopted in education, communication, and business. Organizations promote job satisfaction by taking care of employees' higher needs. Teachers and parents have adopted Rogers' suggestions for education and child rearing. So all of these propositions as well as application values are very strong pros of the humanistic approach. However, the criticisms are that there is the reliance on the concept of free will to explain human behavior, and free will is still a blurry concept. People haven't reached a consensus about that. The key concepts are poorly defined, like self-actualization, fully functioning. Yes, they are defined to a certain extent, but it can be more clear. They might sound more abstract to a layman. There's limited applicability of psychotherapy techniques. So I actually criticize this criticism because I don't fully agree with it, but this is what has been proposed as one of the limitations, so I'm putting forth to you. And then there's a naive assumption about human nature. So this is about the criticisms of the humanistic approach. Make sure to read over the summary slides, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Thank you for listening, and I hope this presentation was helpful. All the best.